My failure narrative was my struggle of living on my own. Just a little disclaimer before I really get into this video. You will see my dog running around in the background. Try not to pay him any attention. Sorry, I felt bad putting him in his cage. But for the past 18 months, I've lived on my own. I live by myself, except for with my puppy. I support myself 100% financially. Pay for rent. I pay all my utilities, groceries, gas, anything I need, I have to pay for. And needless to say, the last 18 months have been really trying, especially since, I have to work to support myself, and I've been in school taking a full course load the entire time. I moved out on my own for several reasons. I knew that I wanted to live by myself because my first adventures with failure were with roommates. I had roommates for 2 years while I lived on campus. Neither of them worked out. I also knew that I didn't want to pay for on-campus housing because I knew I would be in that much more debt, more than I already am, which is already a ridiculous amount. So, luckily at that time, I was in a really good place at my job, and I was likely to get promoted to a management position in the city that my school is in. And a few months passed, and I find out that I do get the position, but everyone failed to tell me that I did actually get the position, and I found out about 8 days before they needed me to start. And I did not have an apartment. I did not have furniture. I had no idea how in the world I was going to make it work, but I knew I needed to make it happen in 8 days. I had tried to predict how my paychecks were going to be, but you really have no idea how much it actually costs to live on your own until you're actually on your own. About 4 days after I moved into my apartment, I got a puppy, and he's sitting next to me chewing his bone. And prior to that, I never had a pet. The only pet that I had had was a pet snail from like second or third grade until fifth grade. I had him for like 3 years, and then he exploded. So obviously I'm not very responsible. Yeah, his name was Snoopy. He was a great snail. But I definitely was not ready for all that it took to take care of a dog. I didn't realize how much went into it. I initially had wanted a cat, but the cats that I was looking at were the same price as the dog, and he was cute. So I was like, yay, yeah, it's a great idea to get a dog. Dogs are going to be such a good companion. Not even taking into consideration that, they're basically furry humans. I didn't bother to tell my landlord at the time that I had gotten my puppy, because I knew I couldn't afford that extra rent. I did eventually plan on telling them, just when the time was right, when I actually had the money to, pay for everything that needed to be paid for to have him at my apartment. And my whole mentality that this whole time, I'm thinking, they have over 450 tenants. How in the world are they going to be able to, find my puppy? But about a month and a half, well, the first month and a half that I was living on my own, I was working a lot. It was in the middle of summer. I had a completely open schedule. It was peak season for retail, so I was getting a lot of hours. I was living pretty comfortably. But once school started, my schedule was a little bit more limited, and I slowly but surely saw my hours decreasing at work. And so I started to look into other job options. Didn't get very far with that because I really didn't have that much time at that time. And, one day I was actually about 2 hours away from here working when my landlord called me and told me that the water main in the apartment above me had broken and completely flooded. And so they had to enter my apartment, which was completely legal because it was an emergency. Luckily, there was minimal flooding in my apartment, but there was a totally illegal puppy. And needless to say, my landlord was not very happy with me, and I got 30 days to find a new place. At the time I was completely devastated. I had only lived there for 3 months. Everything was so new to me, so new to me. And, you know, I was beating myself up over it. Like, I could not believe how careless and how naive I had been. I cried for probably a week every day. I just cried and cried and cried. The whole time, you know, I was thinking, like, even if they did find my puppy, like, she's just gonna, you know, make me pay for him, or like I'll get a warning, a fair warning. I didn't never did it cross my mind that I would actually get kicked out. But I was definitely wrong, and I learned the hard way that I was wrong. I thought at the time, you know, I thought it was going to be impossible for me to find an apartment, especially, you know, in the price range that I needed it to be in. I literally could not afford another dollar to pay more. And, you know, one day I was at work, and the associate that I was working with said that someone was there to see me. And, you know, I don't know that many people here. So I'm like, who in the world could it be? So it kind of freaks me out a little bit. But I come out, and it was the manager from another store. And she was doing a little bit of networking, you know, trying to see if we had any full-time applicants that we couldn't employ, or if we knew anyone who was looking for full-time. And, you know, the marketer in me totally put myself out there, and I jumped on that opportunity. I said, I need it. I need the money. I know it's going to be a challenge, but I'm willing to challenge myself. Knowing in the back of my mind that I was 9 times out of 10 completely setting myself up for failure, I figured working full time, taking 6 classes, something's gonna fall off. And living and having a roof over my head is a little bit more important than education. At the time, that's what I was thinking. That's what my mindset was. It'd be a lot easier to give up school than it would be to give up a home. A couple weeks pass, and I find out that I got the apartment that I applied for, and I also find out that I got the job. And I was so excited. So excited. This happened, you know, within days of each other. I found out about both. And it was almost like a fresh start for me. But little did I know the struggle would totally, completely continue to struggle. And somehow I survived working holiday season full time while still taking all my 18 credit hours during finals week and whatnot. The first month at my new job, like, I felt like a completely new person. You know, I not only had my new apartment, but I was in a higher management position at this job. And at the time, I felt like I was making really good money. But once the month started to pass, my paycheck started to get tighter and a little tighter and a little tighter. And, you know, I worked as much as I could because I knew I had no other way of getting the money. But I was living paycheck to paycheck. And in all reality, it was about paycheck to about 4 days before paycheck. A couple months after I started this job, I actually totaled my car. Me totaling my car, I only had liability insurance, and so I had to pay for everything out of pocket because that's all I could afford at the time. And that was, you know, me being happy about being in my new place and being in a new position and overcoming all the struggles that I had just, you know, overcome with working full time and being on my own and, you know, still being in school. That was the calm before the storm, pretty much. That's what I was feeling like at that point. I was feeling pretty defeated. But meanwhile, at my new apartment, you know, while I'm dealing with all this with my car, I had gotten new furniture, and my new apartment was definitely a downgrade from my old apartment. And so I didn't have very much storage, so I had to buy a lot of, you know, new things. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I don't have that many people here, so I've pretty much been forced to become my own handyman, you know, as much as my apartment's maintenance isn't. Because if I could call them for everything, I totally would. I would totally call them for everything. But I put together 2 dressers. Both are falling apart as we speak. But I put together my bed. which, you know, you think it wouldn't have been that difficult, but my box spring is now broken in half because I didn't put it on the frame correctly or didn't put the frame together correctly. You know, moving out on my own, I didn't think to bring tools. I didn't, you know, you don't think about those kind of things unless you have someone to tell you, and I totally didn't. I didn't have a hammer, I didn't have nails, I didn't have a drill, I didn't have drill bits. You know, I didn't have any of that. I did have a screwdriver, and it totally saved my life for the most part because I used it, you know, as a screwdriver. I used it as a hammer. I used it to pry things apart. I used it in every way that you could possibly use a hammer or a screwdriver. And, you know, I put together my kitchen table, and it has 2 chairs with it, and they all 3 wobble, but, I mean, they look good. I've also tried installing blinds, in which I didn't think to buy a drill to install the blinds, because they don't necessarily fit with the blinds that I have in there now. And so that prompted me to buy my drill, which made me realize that drills don't come with drill bits. And my most recent failure, that was pretty recent. I tried installing a shelf on my wall, and somehow, without a stud finder, out of all the things that I have nailed to my walls, I found studs on both sides. So now the screws won't fit into the wall, so I can't hang my shelf. And needless to say, my journey living on my own has been about 90% failure. Every day is a learning experience. I literally learn something every day that I say to myself, damn, I wish someone would have told me that. That would have been nice to know. But, you know, Google, me and Google are tight. Me and Google are BFFs. But I still don't manage my money well. And I am not very much of a handyman, believe it or not. With or without tools, that still is not one of my fortes. You know, I still run into things that I would not know what to do until I got into that situation, and then I got to figure out how the hell do I get myself out. I'm hoping, you know, that the majority of my struggles are done. I'm hoping that I have already seen most of my darkest days, and that hopefully this journey does get easier. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to my struggle, and yeah, it was great. Bye. Say hi to the people. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay.